Good evening, everyone. I'm Freddie Beeman, Chairman of the Board of the Brisbane Chamber of Commerce, and I'd like to welcome you to our annual State of the City event. We're pleased with the turnout of this, our second evening's State of the City, and are excited to hear. Can't hear it?
Yeah.
And we're excited to hear what Mayor Miller and City Manager Holstein are going to share with us today. I would also like to thank the team at South San Francisco Scavenger, our event sponsor. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce a couple of VIPs. First, our City Council members, Mayor Ray Millen, Terry O'Connor, Cliff Lentz, and Council candidates Lori Liu and Gavin Escalar. I'd also like to thank Nicole Fernandez for being here today. She's from the Office of State Senator Jerry Hill. Thank you. Brisbane Police Chief Lisa Masaith. Deputy Chief North County Fire Richard Johnson. Ken Walker, Brisbane School District Trustee. And as she's just walked in the door, Tony Presta, Brisbane School District Superintendent. I'd also like for all the Chamber Board members to stand up and introduce yourself, please. We'll start with Barbara.
Barbara Bernardini, South San Francisco Scavenger Company.
Jennifer Wilder-Smith, Director of Service.
Dan Carter, Land Medical Construction. Rich Bergello, Recology.
I'd also like to thank the Radisson Hotel and Zeebeck Restaurant. Was it good food? And for their help in assisting the event. All of us at the Chamber support the work that the City Council and staff do each and every day to serve our community. When we moved to the event to the evening last year, we hoped to give the community a greater opportunity to attend this important event. By judging the turnout, I think we made the right decision. I would like to turn the microphone over now to the Honorable Mayor Ray Millen.
I actually prepared a speech. All right, so good evening and thank you all for coming. I want to thank the Chamber for giving me the opportunity this evening to discuss a few matters of importance to Brisbane. And I want to thank the South San Francisco Scavengers for hosting this event. The issues I wish to discuss include the budget, the Baylands, economic viability, and the current political campaign. Usually the city manager gets assigned the budget in this presentation because it's known as the boring part. However, I have a different perspective on the budget. In my view, it is the most important thing that the council does. After all, the budget sets the priorities, allocates the funding for everything that the city does. But understanding its complexity and detail requires a significant commitment of homework. Since the council meetings on the budget usually have minimal public participation, it's evident that very few citizens are interested in making that commitment, which is always sad to me. So let's talk a little bit about the budget. For the current fiscal year, 2013-14, the total budget for the city of Brisbane is $23,200,000. For comparison, the total projected expenditures for the Brisbane Elementary School District, hope I got this right, for the same period is $5,980,000. However, included in the city's 23 million figure is over $5 million for debt service. I have a table here I'm going to show. Yep. So you can see all the major funds that the city has. $5 million for debt service and over $5.5 million for enterprise funds, essentially businesses that the city runs whose revenue should cover their cost. The main enterprise funds are water and sewer and the marina. Now, I want to note at this point that this table and the two pie charts that will be next in the list here have already appeared in the luminary. But I'm assuming that it helps to have an illustration and one that, unless you have a photographic memory, you haven't totally internalized all these figures. But it gives me an opportunity to thank the Chamber and the Luminary for allowing me the opportunity in the mayor's column to share matters of mutual interest. I've appreciated that very much. The biggest component in the debt service fund are the bonds that were issued to pay for the construction of the marina and the infrastructure at Sierra Point. And that currently amounts still to about $28 million. The debt service is paid from property taxes that are collected at Sierra Point. The bonds were initially issued in the early 1980s, but because of refinancing, they have another 15 years or so before they mature. The heart of the city's budget is the general fund. It's 2013-14 projected expenditures, as you see, $13,454,000. And you see that the biggest categories are police for, can you see, 22%? And fire is 17%. Recreation is 12%. And then other important public services, fill out the rest of the expenditures of the city's budget. Now, the revenues for the city are $12,606,000. They come from four major sources, as you see on the chart. The business license taxes are 19%, sales taxes are 18%, property taxes 17%, and hotel taxes 13%. It's important to note, and this is especially in the context of the chamber, that 84% of the general fund tax revenue comes from business sources, not residential. Now, as you can tell by the difference in the figures between expenditures and revenues, the general fund has a projected deficit of almost $850,000 for this coming year. Last year's general fund budget also had a projected deficit, but thanks primarily to better than expected sales tax revenue, the budget actually ended up in surplus. The council is obviously hoping for a similar outcome this year. By comparison, the Brisbane School District budget also has a projected deficit in the amount of $96,500. The city's projected general fund deficit is 6.7% of revenue, whereas the school district's is 1.6%. Both the school district and the city have reserves in order to prepare for fiscal crises such as end-of-year deficits. The school district's reserves are about $4 million, whereas the city's reserves are about $10 million. However, only about 75% of the city's reserves are actually available cash. The rest is restricted in one way or another. For instance, $1.1 million was lent by the city to the Affordable Housing Fund of the Brisbane Redevelopment Agency. With the dissolution of all redevelopment agencies by the state's Department of Finance will determine if and when that loan will ever be repaid. This year's budget has a few notable changes from last year's. In order to deal with the large amount of overtime in the police budget, as Chief Macias knows very well, the council authorized the hiring of 2 new police officers. The council also stopped the diversion of funds from the Marina Fund to the recreation program and redirected it to deferred maintenance at the marina. In addition, the council focused on addressing the backlog of capital needs. Therefore, the budget includes funds for repairing the fire station, replacing outmoded segments of the water and sewer system, acquiring new software for the finance department, and starting the planning process for dredging the marina and rehabilitating the skate park. The city's fiscal situation is certainly better than many of the state's 482 cities. However, we do have some of those, quote, unfunded liabilities, unquote. For example, we still have about $8 million in uncovered pension liabilities. The city has established a long-term payment program with the Public Employees Retirement System to address this obligation. Another unfunded need is the cost of replacing the deteriorating capital infrastructure in our water and sewer systems, as Randy knows. That's another $34 million. Recently, the city fiscally survived the departure of VWR and its over $2 million annual sales tax contributions to the city's revenues. Actually, nearly 20% of our general fund revenues came from VWR. The key to our survival was negotiating with Recology a tonnage-based recycling business license tax of about the same amount. However, the continuation of this tax is dependent upon Recology being able to expand its operational facilities further into Brisbane, a crucial component in its program to meet San Francisco's goal of zero waste. We are hoping the representatives from both of the corporations I'm going to mention here now, sitting here tonight, we are hoping that Recology's expansion plans and UPC's development plans will find a compatible synergism. By the way, that's the end of the material that was previously in the luminary. There were a couple new things I added, those of you who really paid attention, particularly the unfunded liabilities and the reserve situation. Now let's talk about the Baylands. The really big issue on the horizon is the planning process for the Baylands. The comment period for the massive draft environmental impact report is scheduled to end in a few weeks. To facilitate effective and useful comments, the Council has instituted a rather unusual process. It has established a citizens committee to systematically peruse and make pertinent and relevant comments. The city also hired an EIR trainer to help all citizens understand the nature of an environmental impact report. Other citizen advisory committees are also working diligently in preparing comments, especially the Open Space and Ecology Committee. which actually is meeting tonight, so they're not here, obviously. Evidently, one of the consequences of this approach was that very few people showed up for the public comment sessions held under the auspices of the Planning Commission. I tried to assure people who were concerned about that in fact the process that we're using is going to create much more effective comments. After the comment period ends, work will begin on constructing a survey that will elicit voter views on the parameters of an approvable plan. This questionnaire will be scientifically designed. It will not be the type of biased instrument that has recently been sent to Brisbane residents. When the environmental firm provides its answers to all the comments in a document known as the Final Environmental Impact Report, the Baylands planning process gets underway. Since it's unlikely that the developer's proposed plan in its entirety will be approved, the Planning Commission and the Council will need to work on forging a mutually agreeable alternative plan. Of course, the Council will look first to the views of the citizens and second to negotiating with the landowner developer. In addition to land use planning resources, the public and the council will also have available to it financial and ecological information that will be prepared by independent consultants. Because the most realistic plan undoubtedly involves implementation in phases, it may be appropriate to amend the general plan in phases. However, before moving to any approvals, we need to bring a comprehensive plan to the voters of Brisbane. Moving on to economic viability. Since its incorporation in 1961, Brisbane has struggled to achieve economic and thus fiscal viability. Some of our most controversial issues involved what citizens were willing to accept in order to acquire adequate funding for public services. In the 60s, the fight was over allowing garbage dumping in exchange for payments to the city. In the early 70s, it was about allowing a large housing development on San Bruno Mountain, which we didn't. In the late 1970s, it was whether to accept combined police and fire services, which we did for a while. In the early 80s, it was about whether to accept a garbage incinerator in Brisbane, which we didn't. In the mid-80s, it was about allowing housing on the northeast ridge of the mountain in exchange for annexing the Crocker Industrial Park. And in a legal settlement, that was done. In the 1990s, it was whether to allow a casino on Sierra Point. We didn't approve it. In the 2000s, it was whether to allow housing in the quarry. We didn't allow that either. Brisbane voters are very picky about what they will allow to happen to its city, to their city. The annexation of Crocker Park has proven to be a major economic and fiscal benefit for Brisbane. Just as a historical footnote, the county was quite furious about that because they had no idea that it was such a viable economic space because their records weren't very good, obviously. However, it wasn't an easy accomplishment to annex, and we had to fight lawsuits, and we also had to fight movement in the legislature to de-annex it. It was a very difficult process, and it wasn't really finally settled until the litigation came to an end in 1989. As an aging industrial park, Crocker Park has had its ups and downs. Funds from the Northeast Ridge Development Agreement enabled the park's utility and streets infrastructure to be updated. The business outreach efforts of the Chamber, especially its CEO, Mitch Bull, the Council Subcommittee, Clark and Cliff, and staff, Clay and Stewart, their outreach efforts have really paid off. The park is now 91% occupied. and other major businesses are looking to locate there. Recent leasees include Pacific Gourmet, AT&T, FW Spencer, Bay Medical, Town Air Freight, and Del Monte Meats. There is a total of 3,700,000 square feet of industrial space in the park. Definitely our largest business space. Despite our successes in the Crocker Park, we still have vacancy problems in the Brisbane Village Shopping Center and at Sierra Point. In fact, Sierra Point is only about halfway built, even though it was planned and approved in the 1970s. It would be instructive to study Sierra Point in order to determine why it hasn't fulfilled its potential. It might provide lessons for the upcoming planning of the Baylands. And then finally, I'd like to make just a few personal remarks about the current political campaign. Future budget projections provided by our finance director demonstrated to the council that the city needs to enhance our future revenues if we wish to keep offering the level of public services to which our citizens have become accustomed. One of the business operations that we consider as not paying its fair share of taxes was the tank farm. Its early promise of a continuous flow of sales taxes never materialized. The tank farm only pays about $25,000 in taxes to the city. In contrast, VWR was providing over $2 million in sales taxes. Each of our hotels pays about $1 million in transit occupancy taxes. Recology pays over $2 million in recycling fees. When this issue first came up to the council, I expressed my concern about how the tank farm owner would react. After all, fossil fuel energy corporations are known for being better at obtaining Fossil fuel energy corporations are known for being better at obtaining subsidies from the political process than paying their fair share of taxes. President Obama has made this point, but he hasn't been able to do much about it. The reaction of the tank farm owner to the ballot measure asking the voters for authorization to tax their facility has been even worse than I imagined. The tank farm owner's campaign of blatant disinformation and frontal attack on the business-friendly reputation of the city has crossed all the ethical lines that I respect. I greatly admire the voluntary actions of citizens who were outraged by the tank farm owner's campaign and who are fighting back. We will see whether their grassroots efforts can overcome the bottomless pile of money against them. Over 100,000 so far and still counting. Together we need to cherish our community and work together against outside forces attempting to unravel our fabric. We will not let that happen. Thank you.
Good evening. Glad to be here, and this year I get to go second. I don't know if that's better, worse, or indifferent. I'll let you decide when we get done with this. I'm going to try to cover a couple areas. One is the mayor spoke briefly about some of the capital improvements that we have in the 2013-2014 budget. I want to go into a little more detail with regards to what we're doing there. And then I want to talk a little bit about the staffing of the city of Brisbane and a little bit about the history over the last few years and kind of where we're heading in the near future and where we think we need to head in the more medium-term future. Excuse me. So as the mayor indicated, we have a number of capital projects, and the kind of really interesting point about this year is that this is the first time in, I think, 3 or 4 or 5 years that we've really been able to put money into our capital infrastructure in the city in any concentrated sort of way. So it's really, for me, and I think for the staff and for the council, it's the beginnings of coming out of the Great Recession and being able to really start reinvesting in our community. As many of you know, we had to close down our fire station several years ago because of mold problems. That doesn't mean we didn't have a fire department. We had the fire department there, but we had them working out of trailers, and they've been in that situation for the last few years. While that has sufficed on the short term, it's certainly not the long term of what we want to see happen. So this year, the council just approved a contract for about $138,000 to do fire station repairs, which includes roof repairs, mold removal, replacing the sheetrock and drywall, thoroughly cleaning and recoating the heating and air conditioning system, and removing and replacing the carpet in the dormitory area. Once this work is done, which should happen, I would think probably by next spring. I'm looking at my public works director. Put him on the spot there. The firefighters will be able to move back into the station. The mayor also mentioned the marina. The marina is in the neighborhood, I think, of around 30 years old. It is in need of some major maintenance work, and so in this year's budget, we have budgeted to do a major marina dock repair project, realign the docks, replace rotting and wadler boards, rub rail corner bumpers, and worn cleats. That's all marina talk. And then replace the work piling guides, the rollers, and dock flotation billets. We're also budgeting some money to do a analysis of the dredging that will be required, which we anticipate doing in the next 2 to 3 years. The way we're doing the marina project is a little bit different in terms of capital projects. We're actually hiring people because we anticipate this to be about a 2 to 3 year project. We're bringing on maintenance people that are working under the supervision of the Public Works Department. Once they're finished with this project, which I anticipate in the next couple of years, then the idea is that we will transfer them on to other public works activities in our buildings and grounds and some other areas in the city where we need to put some effort in terms of our maintenance of facilities. And the mayor also mentioned the utility projects. This is the water and sewer system. We have, in the early 2000s, did a fairly comprehensive analysis of our water and sewer capital needs over time. We were somewhat successful in the early 2000s being able to get some monies through our rate structure to be able to do some projects. And then when the Great Recession hit, we had to kind of back off of that. So this is the first year that we're starting back up, ramping up our program. We have about $35 million worth of needs. This is about $5 million worth of projects, so it's just the first of many phases, but it's the more higher priority items. One is the Bayshore Boulevard sewer, which is currently overground, and we need to get it underground. The Glen Park pump station is an upgrade the booster pump station to the capacity that was identified in the 2003 study. The PRV construction fire mains, and the SCADA system, and don't ask me to give you what SCADA means, but basically it's the mind and the brains behind the monitoring of our water and sewer systems that allow us to do a lot of things remotely and for our staff to understand what's happening. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the city staff, but before I get into this picture, I'm going to go through about 3 or 4 different positions and give you kind of a little bit of a sense of what it takes to do the work that city employees do. We have in the city of Brisbane 50 different positions currently in the city, unique positions. Most of those are full-time, some of them are part-time. Each one of them obviously has a different skill set that's required for their work. I've provided for you, hopefully you got a chance to take a look at this brochure. We went back this year through our summer intern program and had one of our interns work on this document. Your first reading of it might suggest that this is our whining and moaning and, I won't say the B word, document. And to some extent it is. But that really isn't the purpose of it. It is an effort to try to lay out what we have done over the last 5 years to deal with the financial situation. Our reduction in staffing has been 27% over that time. Our reduction in payroll has been about $2.5 million. That's pretty significant, and that to some extent we've been able to cover that without reductions in services and impacts. But in a lot of cases, we have started to see kind of the wear and tear on the organization in terms of being able to meet the demands. The mayor talked about the issues with the police department and the overtime. I kind of analogize it to that, you can drive your car and put your foot to the accelerator, to the bottom, and drive it at 90 miles per hour for a while. But you can't do that forever. And we've been basically working our officers to the point where, we needed to get some relief into the system. As you may or may not know, there are often times when we only have 2 officers on duty at a particular point in time. That's the lowest amount that we can have in terms of safety. You can never get down to a situation where you only have 1 officer. So a lot of overtime has been needed, and frankly, we've had to have both the chief and the deputy chief who are here today actually out on the streets doing patrol work from time to time, and that's a pretty unique situation. So I think what the purpose of this really is to give you a sense not only of how we've managed the last 5 years, but really kind of what the issues are going forward in terms of the needs of the city in terms of on a staffing level. So just to go through some of the positions and what it takes to do these jobs. Police officers, it takes about 2.5 years from the time somebody starts into the process of being hired to the time that they're a fully functioning police officer on the street. They have to first come in, there's a written test, oral board interview with functional experts in the police field, interviews with the chief, deputy chief. If they get through that part of the process, then what we have is called the background process, which is basically polygraphing, fingerprinting, doing background psychological evaluations, physical examinations. And if they get past that part of it, and we get to the point where we make a job offer and bring somebody on, we hire them as a trainee, and then they go into a police academy, 960 hours of classroom work, laws, policies, physical training, defensive testing, firearms testing, things of that nature. Now, sometimes we actually hire people that are already through the academy. We get somebody a little bit further along in the process, but this is what anybody that wants to be a police officer will need to do to be hired in Brisbane, or frankly, or any police agency. Water and sewer systems. I think most of us don't really think about what it takes to work and operate a water and sewer system, but it's fairly technical work, and it takes a number of qualifications to be able to actually just work on the system, let alone oversee and manage it. All employees who work or inspect the water system must have a water distribution operator certificate issued by the California Department of Public Health. That's the maintenance guys, that's people who do the inspections, that's the people who supervise. Anybody who's involved in the system has to have that certification. All employees who maintain sewer systems have to have a wastewater certification issued by the California Water Environment Association. Buildings and grounds, these are the people who take care of our parks, take care of our buildings. They have a certification by the California Landscape Contractors Association. And then we have 3 civil engineers in our operation. One of them is our Director of Public Works, and others are senior civil engineer who's here tonight. The other person handles our water and wastewater systems. These are people who have 4-year college degrees in engineering, an 8-hour engineering training exam, 2 years of supervised experience, 3 recommendations from a licensed peer to get a PE license, and then they have the joy of taking a 13-hour test over 2 days that deals with everything from civil, seismic, and surveying. And we have, as I indicated, 3 people on our staff that have that background. And then even in the part-time positions, lifeguards. This is an area that is really a very critical position in terms of having people with qualifications, even though they tend to be very young folks. But they're dealing with people in potentially life and death situations. And we've had, I think several years ago, we had actually a couple of lifeguards come on, and the very first day they were there, they were dealing with somebody who was having a problem, potentially drowning in the pool. So you imagine that on your first day of work. It requires Red Cross certification, 25 hours of training. Swim instructors, there's additional training required. And then we do a week-long in-service prior to the summer session every year to refresh our lifeguards. And then we do life-saving audits for instructors throughout the summer. So fire department. Fire departments aren't just fire departments these days. Their bulk of their work is actually medical response and paramedic response. We have a very elaborate and actually award-winning system here in San Mateo County. We use the fire departments as really the first responders on medical calls. Ambulances will come in after the fact, which is sometimes misunderstood by folks, that they think the ambulance didn't get there until late. That's actually the way the system's supposed to work. The firefighters should be there first. Firefighter, paramedics, entry-level written test and candidate physical ability, 300 hours through the California firefighters status, 480 hours of cadet program. Most candidates in the fire service have a AA degree in fire service management, and then emergency medical technician certification, which is a step below the paramedic. The paramedic license requires a hospital internship or ambulance internship, and every fire engine company in San Mateo County has at least one fire paramedic on the engine in every shift. You have to pass a national paramedic test. After we hire new firefighters, unless they're a lateral that comes in from another agency, they are sent off to a 14-week academy. And then they're on probation from anywhere from a year to a year and a half. So that just gives you a little bit of a flavor of some of our positions. As I indicated, we have 50 unique positions in the city that we're staffing at this particular point in time. This is just 4 of them in the qualifications that we have in terms of the people that manage our operations. And I just finally to say that, you know, one of the reasons that I feel that we've been able to make it through the last several years, and we are now in a position where I think we're poised to do some really good things in terms of both our service levels as well as our capital needs, is that we have a really veteran staff at this point in time. A lot of people have been around for a number of years. They were able to come in and do multiple tasks during this period of time, something that if the staff was less experienced, I think probably would have been more problematic. The employees, I have to tip my hat to everybody who works for the city because they've really made this work. To the extent that I've looked good, the finance director have looked good, it's really because the employees have made it happen. So I just want to acknowledge them publicly tonight. And with that, I think we're done with the formal part of the show. And then I guess at this point we'd entertain any questions for either the mayor or myself. Okay, well, thank you. No. Somebody's got to ask some questions.
Can you elaborate more on the pension obligation? Is that $8 million a year or?
No.
$8 million total?
Yeah.
What is that? What is it?
That comes from the problems of the public employee retirement system, really, misjudging their own projections. And then we have to pay our share of their misjudgment. And that's the total amount of their misjudgment that they have allocated to us. And we have a payment system, I think it's something like $477,000 a year which will eventually make up that unfunded liability. But the origin of it was basically actuarial mistakes made by PERS. But we all get stuck with it.
I just add to that, I mean, the core problem with that was really the stock market crash in 2008, 2009, which just set all the actuarial assumptions, on their heads.
You don't have concerns about kind of ongoing, like a lot of cities have huge pension obligations?
We've dealt with our other unfunded liabilities, so this is the only other one. At the moment, I think, it's manageable. We have some other unfunded liabilities in terms of post-employment benefits that we're going to need to deal with in the next couple of years. But I think our numbers are, they're serious numbers, but they're manageable.
Are you planning on having another citizens gathering? I found that helpful and I recommended it to other citizens, but I didn't know if it was going to be offered this year.
We haven't really made that decision. We've talked about it, yeah.
We kind of delayed it this year because we had all this activity going on with the draft environmental document and a number of people who were engaged in that, including, a number of staff people. So I think once we get past that, I think the idea is that we'd probably do one next fall.
In the back?
When the police department was downsized, the school resource officer position was eliminated. Since new officers are being hired, is it possible that one of them could take on the role of school resource officer? It's not that we need a police presence on campus very often, if at all, it's not really required, but I think it's great for the students to have interaction with the department and have that positive rapport.
Yeah, I think we're not at the point where we're going to be able to have dedicated positions. We had a detective position at one point. We had a school resource officer, and there was, I think, maybe a couple others. I don't think we're at the point where we're going to be able to have dedicated positions. But I don't know if the chief wants to respond to that at all. I mean, certainly, our relationship with the schools are important, and we want to be able to have that good relationship and have officers being able to do what we can do at this point. But a dedicated position, I think, is probably still off in the future. Did you want to add anything to that?
And I have to concur with Clay as well. We do have bringing on the additional officers this fiscal year will allow an officer to be in the liaison with the school. So we certainly will be able to bring that back, but certainly it's going to take us a while to get back up to full force in order to be able to designate an officer just to the schools, the high schools as well as our elementary schools. But we hope to get there.
Thank you.
Do we have any projections on City and County of San Francisco coming to a decision on the ecology expansion?
Well, I think the city and county of San Francisco is in full support of Recology's application to the city of Brisbane, and that application is in process at this point. Recology has made that application. There will be a draft environmental document that will be coming out relatively soon with regard to that. But the city and county of San Francisco is definitely on board with wanting to have that project approved in Brisbane.
So the question can be turned around as to, so the approval process in Brisbane is really the key. And that is just begun, so that'll be, over the next year or two, that'll be determined.
Yeah.
It is being studied, the variant is being studied in the draft DIR. And so that planning process has begun, but there'll be a couple of years before things will be resolved.
It did take the action of the city of San Francisco, I believe through the Board of Supervisors, to actually approve the fee. So that did take place.
Tony?
Well, all of this work is being done on the Baylands project and the Stanford Recovery Ecologies project. Has there been an effort to integrate with that a cleanup, an end to the illegal dumping on Tunnel Road? The reason I asked that is because I was just attending a meeting in San Francisco at the Little Hollywood Neighborhood Owners Association, where they had a San Francisco police captain there, and he mentioned that Homeland Security had given their department 4 or 5 night vision cameras that they're going to use in the neighborhood so they can catch people who are doing illegal dumping on the San Francisco side. And I told him, as a resident of Brisbane, who also owns a property in San Francisco in that neighborhood, that it's great to see that they're finally paying attention to that area of San Francisco that they've neglected very badly. But we don't want them to just push the problem into Brisbane, which is one of the things that tends to happen. And at present, even the way the city has a couple of big dumpsters at its corporation yard encourages this illegal dumping. I chased somebody off of there just last week. So I'd like to have the city council and the city planning people pay some attention to that, if possible.
Yeah, I'll mention a couple of things, and then I'll ask the city manager and others, because we certainly are aware of that problem, and it's been going on for years, as you know. The location of the dumpster, we've kind of decided probably it was an experiment, and we discovered that probably wasn't the best experiment, but at least we know now. We have made some arrangements with 2 scavenger companies. I think South San Francisco Scavengers will help us with littering and dumping on Bayshore Boulevard, and Recology will help us, on Tunnel Avenue. But the idea of the surveillance cameras, I know that's come up before, but I don't know where that stands or what was decided. Do you have any knowledge of that?
Yeah, well, I mean, this gets to be kind of a complicated issue, but the enforcement of illegal dumping is a very difficult thing to do. And it's a very difficult thing to prosecute in an effective sort of manner. I recognize, and I think the council certainly understands that, the location of the dumpsters that we put at the Corp Yard is not a long-term plan, but it certainly has helped in terms of illegal dumping on Tunnel Avenue for the short term. As the mayor has indicated, we are in discussions and negotiations both with South San Francisco Scavengers and with Recology. As you may or may not know, Recology is actually going to be the service provider on the Baylands for refuse collection, and in their franchise agreement we have already talked to them about the responsibility of cleaning up Tunnel Avenue on a real-time basis. And we're also working very closely with South San Francisco Scavengers with regards to Bayshore Boulevard. You may or may not, for people in the audience, Bayshore Boulevard a month ago was a mess. It was an embarrassment how much debris and waste was out there. And we approached South San Francisco Scavengers about doing a sweep through there, and they did. They brought in some staff. And we're able to do, basically hand work to clean up the trash along Bayshore Boulevard. That is something that, we're going to have to be more attentive to going forward, because the issue is that the Regional Water Quality Board, it's probably getting a lot more technical than we want to here, but the Regional Water Quality Board is requiring all cities to have strategies to keep the trash out of the waterways. So you're going to see, not just in Brisbane, but you're going to see in all cities in San Mateo County and San Francisco and Santa Clara County and throughout the Bay Area, much more aggressive action with regards to litter and trash collection, because we're have to. It's going to be part of our permit. A lot of our strategy is probably going to be through our refuse collection companies, but that's still something that we're negotiating and working on.
Well, I said that you may as well take down the illegal dumping sign that has a $500 fine on it if you haven't collected it.
Well,
We did have, we haven't been, and maybe the chief would like to talk about this, but we have had some luck. Every now and then you get someone who dumps, who leaves basically their address there. You wouldn't believe it, but they do. And there was one contractor who was working in San Francisco and decided to come out here and dump and left the address, and we caught them and prosecuted, and they made this statement, well, we didn't know where to put the stuff, I mean, here they are. How far are they from Recology? I mean, it's just unbelievable what people will do to avoid paying a couple of bucks is what it amounts to. But I think we should, it's a hard thing to enforce, and it's hard to catch people, but every now and then people make mistakes. So we have enforced it a little, but it's a problem. And I'd like to dovetail with the relevant adjacent issue, and that is the stockpiling and dust on the Baylands. And that's something a lot of people have been concerned about, and the city is very aggressively pursuing that with the landowner and with the companies. And we hope that we're making some real progress and getting certainly control over the dust issue. And then we have to work harder on what to do about the height of the stockpiles, because the current regulations we have are not very clear. So we're working on improving that situation as well. Other questions? Things you're dying to know. Colleen?
Do we know anything about the VWR site? Are they trying to sell the property? Are they trying to lease it? Do we have any idea what may happen out there?
I'll give what little I know, and then Clay can add to it. To the best of my knowledge, the property is still leased by VWR through 2014. So the landowner, of course, is hoping to, get a new tenant, and been working on that and been talking with city representatives. But as long as VWR doesn't give up its lease, there isn't much can happen so far as occupancy of the space until the end of 2014. Is that right?
Yeah, I wouldn't add anything.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Sure.
In terms of proper industrial new tenants with increased occupancy, could you give us some idea where those tenants are moving to Brisbane from?
Now that's a question that Mitch can answer, I think, better than anybody else, if you're willing to do so.
Mostly San Francisco.
Mostly San Francisco?
Mostly San Francisco.
Uh-huh.
Have they been solicited to move to Brisbane, or have they done it on their own accord?
A bit of both. I mean, we have active commercial brokers that are out talking to people that are looking for space all the time. And as brokers have leads of companies looking at Brisbane, then quite often we bring them in. We have them meet with the city staff, the planning, to see, if there's a property here that meets their needs, and can the city meet their needs as far as timing. A lot of people moving in, it's a matter of timing, when their lease is up, what their needs are, can they get the water they need, can they get the electricity they need, etc. There's a lot of things that impact when a company's going to move from one city to another city. We have an advantage in San Mateo County. We don't charge payroll tax. In San Francisco, they still do charge payroll tax. That's a benefit of trying to get companies to move into San Mateo County. And we're working on a few right now that could be very good for the city.
Of course, unless you're Twitter.
That's different.
Yeah, right. Other questions or concerns? Okay, your last chance. All right, so we thank you very, very much.